You miscarried because you weren't careful enough. Christina, haven't you gotten pregnant again since then? I'm sorry. Blamed by Michael and my mother-in-law, I spent my days in a confined world. I never thought I'd be blamed alone for the miscarriage and not having a child afterward. My heart was completely worn down by this marriage. Then 7 years passed. I miraculously became pregnant. I thought I would never have children again. It was like a bolt from the blue. Michael, who was overjoyed, changed his tune. Really? Awesome. Without changing my expression, I calmly said, I want a divorce. What? Shocked, Michael and my mother-in-law faced me as I shouted, I know all about what Michael has been doing. Stop making a fool of me. What Michael had done was unforgivable. My anger blazed unceasingly, burning ever higher. My name is Christina King, 29 years old. I married Michael, my classmate from vocational school, 8 years ago, at 21. We still don't have kids. Currently, I live with Michael, his parents, and my younger sister Marilyn, a high school student. That's 5 of us. The reason for this living arrangement goes back to when I entered vocational school. I've always loved baking. So, after high school, I enrolled in a pastry chef school. Michael, my husband, was a classmate. We got along very well and started dating soon. College life was so much fun. Just before graduation, my parents died in an accident. It was so sudden, I was engulfed in grief. But I couldn't just cry forever. I had my younger sister Marilyn. She was still in elementary school. I had a job lined up at a famous bakery, but thinking about living expenses and Marilyn's tuition weighed heavily on me. The insurance money from my parents' accident had been used up on medical expenses for my sick grandparents. Could I support Marilyn on my starting salary? When I was feeling anxious, Michael was the one who offered me a lifeline. Let's get married and move to the countryside together, with your sister too, he said. Michael was the heir to a traditional confectionery store. He planned to take over the family business after graduation. I intended to marry Christina sooner or later, it just happened sooner than planned. He assured me that once we were married, his family could help with Marilyn's tuition and living expenses. Of course, I had my doubts about accepting such an offer so easily. But Michael firmly said, Christina, you're practically family already, it's only natural to help each other out. His words were so comforting, I cried. I declined my job offer and became part of the Michaels family. Michael's family lived in the countryside. The traditional confectionery shop run by my in-laws, King, is a long-established business dating back 140 years. In the local community, it was a beloved shop known to everyone. My in-laws welcomed me and Marilyn warmly. I felt safe with them. They even promised to support Marilyn's education and living costs. I remember feeling very relieved. But looking back now, I can only think I was ignorant of the world. I had been thinking naively. I had no idea that marrying into this family would change my fate so dramatically. After marrying Michael, I worked at the confectionery daily. Mostly, I helped my mother-in-law with ordering supplies and managing expenses. Only my father-in-law and Michael actually made the confections. During busy times, some male part-timers from a confectionery school would come to help. It's not that I'm dissatisfied with my current job. But I graduated from a patisserie school. Yet, I haven't made a single confection. I want to work in the kitchen too. Even just to help with preparations. When I tell Michael this, he just says, well, maybe someday, avoiding a clear answer. I felt a bit frustrated, but I had no choice but to comply. As time went on, I got pregnant. 4 months in, we found out it was a boy. Michael and my in-laws were overjoyed. I was happy too. One day, when I was feeling uneasy, I started experiencing stomach pains from the morning. I had a bad feeling about it. I rushed to the nearby OB/GYN. The doctor, who had been taking care of the King family, was recommended to me by my mother-in-law, and I had been visiting here. the elderly doctor began with, "I'm sorry to say." Then slowly, he announced, "You've had a miscarriage." My mind went blank. Stunned, I underwent the necessary procedures and returned home. Could there be anything more heartbreaking? When Michael asked, "How did it go?" I reported back to him through tears. That's when Michael's attitude changed. "What? You had a miscarriage? Why?" "I don't know. There can be many reasons for a miscarriage, they couldn't pinpoint one." "What? Isn't it because you weren't careful enough?" I was shocked by Michael's angry response. I thought. I was expecting comfort, but his reaction was unexpected. I couldn't believe what he said, and as I stood there dumbfounded. My mother-in-law also arrived upon hearing the commotion. "That's right, Christina. It's a shame, expected a boy, and you miscarried. You've let us down." "I didn't. Don't you know? You're supposed to bear a male heir for the King family. If you can't do that, you have no place here." My mother-in-law said this with a terrifying look and returned to her room. I never expected to be spoken to like this. The shock of the miscarriage and the harsh words left me stunned. It took me a long time to recover. Not a single word of sympathy from Michael or my mother-in-law. Instead, they hurled even more bitter words at me. "Geez, how long are you gonna keep that gloomy face? Just forget about it already. If you have time to be down, start thinking about the next child. Make sure a safe delivery of a boy this time." My father-in-law was silent, but it was clear he agreed with them. Their looks towards me became harsher. After the miscarriage, I felt like I was walking on pins and needles in this house. It wasn't my fault I miscarried. The cause was unknown. I explained this over and over, but they insisted it was due to my poor health or behavior. I couldn't believe it. In this day and age, to think such people still exist. Sure, for self-employed families, having an heir might be important. But the King family's obsession was bizarre. I think the gender of the child shouldn't matter, but Michael and his parents were desperate for a boy. Scarily so. However, the real horror was yet to come. After that, I couldn't get pregnant for a while. Each time, Michael and his parents grew colder. "How many months has it been since then, and you're still not pregnant?" "I'm sorry." I was saddened by my mother-in-law's heartless words. She had been so kind at first, but now she had completely changed, a total 180. Michael was the same. He joined in belittling me. A boy or a girl, it should be a precious child. Michael always said, "Make sure you give birth to a boy." He said it was for the sake of the King family's legacy, but it's absurd in this day and age to insist that the heir has to be a boy. That's what I think, but under their cold stares, I often felt down. I have to have a boy. I researched infertility. It can be caused by men too, not just women. With that in mind, I suggested that Michael should also visit the OBGYN with me. But he opposed it fiercely. "Why should I go to an OBGYN? It's your fault we can't have kids." Michael and his parents seemed to think it was my fault. Disappointed, I fell back into a gloomy routine. The only time I felt at peace was when I was with Marilyn. With no parents, I'm practically a parent to her. After work, I'd listen to her school stories every day. Sometimes I'd help her with homework or play with her. Marilyn always looked up to me, calling me big sister. She came to a strange land with me, never complained, and tried her best to adapt. Marilyn was my emotional support. On the other hand, my in-laws' attitude remained the same. I had suggested infertility treatments like in vitro fertilization, but they just gave me suspicious looks. To get pregnant through such a mechanical method is unacceptable. It must be a natural pregnancy, no less. That's my mother-in-law's catchphrase. The family that runs the traditional shop, which had been passed down through generations for a long time, but the people of the King family had outdated ways of thinking. I sighed. It's too unfair to blame me alone for not having a child. I even consulted with the OBGYN. But the doctor, who's been with the King family for a long time, shared a similar view to my mother-in-law. We are strictly aiming for natural conception. We don't do in vitro fertilization, so you'll have to go to a city hospital for that. The city hospitals are too far to realistically go from here. I'm at a dead end. Unexpected stress started affecting my body. I began to experience irregular menstrual cycles, making it even harder to conceive. Then, one day it happened. I was about to go to sleep and looked at the clock. It was 11 p.m. Michael must be coming home late again. A few times a week, he comes home late. Because of preparations for the next day. I was told to go to bed first, so I had already gone to my bedroom. That night, I went to bed early. But for some reason, I couldn't fall asleep. I got up to drink some water. And passed by the living room. That's when I heard it. Michael and my mother-in-law's voices. They were back. I was about to say something, but I stopped in my tracks. What they were talking about was unimaginable. You're late. Can't help it, she wouldn't give it back. She kept asking when I'd leave my wife. I told her I'd think about it if she had a boy. Just a routine task for me to plant my seed in other women, but they take it seriously, annoying really. I had hopes when she got pregnant last time. A girl was a disappointment. Well, if it doesn't work out, we'll look for someone else. Yeah. The Kings need a boy, not a girl. And since she miscarried the boy, and hasn't been pregnant since. If she gives birth to a boy, you should leave Christina. Of course. I couldn't understand what they were talking about. It seemed from the conversation that Michael was cheating. And he was nonchalantly talking about his mistress being pregnant with a girl. I felt my legs shaking. Is this a dream? They both wanted a boy. To the extent of cheating, or rather, treating it like a task. I was so shocked, I had to leave the spot. They were secretly trying to have a child with another woman, behind my back. Both kept saying it was for the King family, but that's just an affair. Unbelievable. Do they want a boy that badly? That's when it hit me. The part-time workers dispatched from the confectionery school were always boys. There should be many women aspiring to be pastry chefs, yet they never hire women. I casually decided to ask. Why do they only accept men? Of course, I couldn't ask anyone from the King family directly. I decided to ask a boy who helps out at the shop. A student from the confectionery school who works the most during his long holidays. Hey, only boys come to help out here, right? Don't girls like this place? I asked nonchalantly, and the boy answered straightforwardly. Not at all. There are plenty of girls in my class who want to work at the Kings. But the job listings at school are for males only. Really? Didn't you know? Oh, right, Christina, you're not originally from here. This shop doesn't allow women in the kitchen. The Kings are quite traditional, believe in customs and all. The boy seemed to regret speaking too much and clammed up. But I pressed on. What customs? Tell me. He reluctantly shared. The Kings had always been succeeded by men. A few generations back, there was a time when no male heir was born, and a woman had to work in the kitchen. But for some unknown reason, the taste and popularity declined, and the King's business suffered. They ended up in massive debt. However, a miracle boy was born later and took over, turning the business around. Since then, there's been a superstition in the King family that if women make confectionaries, the business will fail. That's why women are no longer allowed in the kitchen. Even the part-time help positions were exclusively for men. The locals seemed to know about the King family's customs through word of mouth. So that was it. I finally understood. Michael never let me work in the kitchen. His parents' abnormal desire for a male heir. That's why they turned cold towards me after I miscarried the boy. And then that night's conversation. Desperately trying to have a boy with a woman who wasn't his wife. But isn't that an unethical act? Being unfaithful over some silly superstition. And it seemed like he planned to leave me if the mistress gave birth to a boy. What do they think of people? Treating women as mere tools for childbirth, I was trembling with anger. I wanted nothing more than to leave this house, to divorce. But there was Marilyn. Since I relied on the Kings for her tuition and living expenses, I couldn't divorce until she graduated high school. I had to endure until Marilyn's graduation. But just enduring wasn't enough. I began plotting my revenge against Michael and his parents. Time passed. Years went by, and I was now 29. I had a plan. For it, I needed to make the Kings as famous as possible. I started actively promoting the Kings on social media. Slowly, their popularity grew, and eventually, they became a nationally known store. Though an old establishment, the Kings had been only a local famous shop. Now, they were a household name, featured on TV and in magazines. Michael and my mother-in-law were happy with my work. They were still cold about not having a male child, but my success with social media and boosting the store's business had secured my place in the family. The plan was working. But I was hesitant to execute it. I owed the Kings one thing: they paid for Marilyn's tuition. But Marilyn was about to graduate. She was acquiring medical qualifications while in school. So, Marilyn had already secured a job as a medical office assistant at a small clinic. I'm glad you got the job offer. But you chose a hospital quite far away, huh? Marilyn answered with a somewhat somber expression. Yeah. I wanted to be far away from here. You mean? Sorry, sis. I'm grateful to the Kings for providing for my living expenses and high school tuition. But Marilyn hesitated. When I pressed her for more information, I learned something shocking. Apparently, Michael had tried to assault Marilyn. He said things like, "Christina can't have kids, so you have to fulfill the duty, or I'm paying for your tuition, so pay me back with your body." Thankfully, he was drunk at the time, and she managed to resist and avoid it, but the next day, he warned her, "Don't tell anyone about last night." I felt dizzy. Marilyn had kept quiet about it, considering my position. She had long known I was being blamed by them due to my infertility. Finally, when I graduate high school, we can get away from the Kings. You don't have to stay here and suffer because of me. I'm sorry for making you endure all this. Marilyn spoke through tears. No, I should apologize for putting you through this. If I had seen Michael's true nature earlier. I apologized to Marilyn, crying. Unforgivable. A fierce flame of anger rose within me. It was one thing for them to involve me, but to involve Marilyn too. The Kings used the fact that they were paying for tuition and living expenses to torment us. I had been thankful and grateful when they said they would take care of Marilyn. But now, it felt like they had said it just to tie me to the Kings. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to divorce immediately. And I had to carry out my plan. That's when I decided. But then, something unexpected happened. I couldn't believe it and asked the doctor repeatedly. I was pregnant. Ever since I found out about Michael's infidelity, being intimate with him was a torment. But if I refused, he would verbally abuse me. I had no choice but to comply. And for 7 years, stress had caused me to have irregular menstrual cycles. I thought I couldn't have children, but the irony was that the moment I decided to divorce, I got pregnant. But my decision remained unchanged. I resolved to announce my pregnancy. Michael was surprised, then delighted. He suddenly started praising me. Wow, pregnant! That's great! What's the gender? Tell me quickly! It's too early to know, it's still the beginning. That's right. We can't be sure yet. It has to be a boy. It seemed my mother-in-law had been listening to the conversation. That's right. Let me know as soon as you find out. They were as selfish as ever. Without changing my expression, I said calmly. I want a divorce. What? Michael and my mother-in-law were shocked. I glared at them and let it all out. I know Michael has been cheating for years. No matter how desperate you are to have a boy, it's not excusable. Stop making a fool of me. I have solid proof of your infidelity. After that, I followed Michael when he came home late. He was indeed visiting another woman's house. She seemed to be a high school classmate of Michael's, who had always admired the prestigious King family. It must have been easy for Michael to seduce such a woman. I captured several photos of them together, looking intimate. When I showed the evidence, Michael was taken aback. But he quickly retorted. What are you talking about? This isn't cheating. It's all because you couldn't give birth to a boy. I had no choice but to find another woman to preserve the Kings. Really? And assaulting Marilyn was also unavoidable? Well, that. Michael was at a loss for words. He must have felt guilty. But then my mother-in-law sighed. Her following words were horrifying. Oh, what do you think we took your sister for? If you couldn't do it, we expected Marilyn to fulfill the duty. Anyone will do, as long as they can give birth to a boy. Being able to bear a male child is the only condition to stay in the King family. You worked hard on the social media promotion for us, maybe out of guilt for not having a child. Well, the store became famous because of it, and we appreciate that. But if you can't have a boy, you have no right to be here. Understand? Do these people have no human heart? They saw Marilyn as just a backup plan for me. All they care about is preserving the Kings. I don't understand at all. Is the family so important that you'll hurt our hearts for it? Unbelievable. I can't stay in this absurd, nonsensical family any longer. When I shouted, my mother-in-law made a bitter face. On the contrary, Michael snorted. People outside the King family will never understand, Christina. That's all you were. If you want to divorce that much, fine. But, he said if it's a boy, he wants the child. He doesn't need a girl. How can he speak about his own child like this? I never thought they could be so cold. They seemed like a family crazed with superstitions. I had no choice but to agree to these terms. In return, if the child is a girl, they have to promise never to involve themselves with me again. And so, I was finally able to divorce Michael. On the day I left the King family, I was packing my things. Marilyn had already moved to an apartment rented by her employer. It was too dangerous to stay in the King household any longer. While I was packing, Michael appeared. Hey, isn't it time to find out the baby's gender? Go to the hospital quickly. Even at this time, he's worried about that. I despised him. But I wouldn't have to come here anymore. As a final goodbye, I went to the usual OBGYN. The elderly doctor quickly diagnosed, it's a girl. Their faces, when I told them, were as if to say, see, I knew it. They seemed to have completely lost interest in me. But I didn't care anymore. What these people think doesn't matter. I just wanted to leave the house as soon as possible. This long but short marriage was over. I felt relieved as if a burden had been lifted. But there was still one last thing to do. I updated the King's social media account. And then I left the King house. Afterward, I stayed with Marilyn for a while. Just to be safe, I had informed her workplace that I would be living with her. The clinic director, knowing our situation of having no parents, readily agreed to let me stay. I was grateful for that. Then one day, my phone vibrated intensely several times. It was an angry call from Michael. Hey, Christina! What have you done? I knew the reason for his anger. The last post I updated detailed all the wrongdoings of the Kings. Their detestable customs and Michael's cheating habits. It spread everywhere, appearing in all sorts of media. As the Kings had become a famous store, they were featured prominently on TV news and the internet. They were being bashed relentlessly. If it had been just a small countryside confectionery, it wouldn't have blown up this big. I had ostensibly worked on social media to make the Kings more prosperous and famous. But my true intention was different. If you're to drop someone down from a mountain to the valley, it's better to make the fall from the highest, all at once. That's why I raised the king's fame. I successfully marketed them into a fame unusual for a countryside confectionery. When the time was ripe, I dropped the bomb. I thought we agreed you wouldn't involve yourself with me anymore. I retorted calmly. Yeah, but... Stop being deluded by silly superstitions and treating people like fools with your outdated thinking. You're scum. Get bashed by the public and reflect on your ridiculous actions, I said forcefully and hung up the phone. Shortly after, I went into labor. Fortunately, the clinic where Marilyn worked was an OB/GYN, so I had been attending there. And when I gave birth, it turned out to be a boy. The diagnosis of the country doctor was wrong. Apparently, it's possible to mistake a girl for a boy due to the position of the umbilical cord. But the doctor chuckled. Normally, it's clear enough not to make such a mistake. That doctor was the longtime physician for the King family. Perhaps after years of accommodating the Kings, his skills had dulled? I thought so, feeling fortunate amidst the misfortune. Anyway, if the Kings knew this child was a boy, they would do anything to take him back. I decided to keep silent. The baby's name is Ray. I chose a gender-neutral name for Ray, just in case the Kings ever found out. Ray grew up blissfully unaware of the adults' issues. Meanwhile, the scandal of the Kings didn't die down. Their thoroughly outdated custom of excluding women. Michael's numerous affairs, all excused by succession. These became perfect fodder for a scandal-hungry public. The rumors about the Kings were wildly and fiercely spread. Their reputation affected their business significantly. Their regular corporate customers from hotels and inns started canceling one after another. And the number of walk-in customers decreased. Gradually, their business went into debt. And eventually went bankrupt. Michael and his parents now apparently live in a small apartment. To cover the debts, they had to sell their house and store. Shocked by their downfall, Michael's parents fell ill. Michael now spends his days caring for them. And of course, being looked down upon by the locals, but also the relentless bashing on social media by strangers. Their names, photos, and even their address were exposed online. They've had endless troubles like graffiti on their house and stones thrown at them. To me, it was all their own doing. A family that believed in outdated superstitions and dehumanized people. No matter how famous their confectionery was, who would want to eat it knowing the people behind it lacked any compassion? Watching Ray play with his toys, I thought about it. Here was the boy the Kings had so desperately wanted. It's ironic that they went bankrupt after a boy was finally born. Captured by their own agenda, they lost sight of what it means to be human. Ray looked at me curiously. I decided to stop thinking about them. My revenge was over. It was time to use my time for myself. I made up my mind to pursue something I had been envisioning. As time passed, Ray entered elementary school. At the same time, I decided to rent an apartment. I couldn't keep staying in Marilyn's workplace apartment forever. Besides, I had received a substantial amount of money. I had become a pastry chef, making my own cakes. I rented a small shop to sell them. At first, they didn't sell much, but gradually they became popular through word of mouth. From there, corporate customers like nearby hotels started increasing, and my business got on track. That's why I was able to plan for renting an apartment to live with Ray. I was so happy to be working as a pastry chef again. After all, I hadn't made sweets for a while since marrying into the Kings. But when I made sweets again and saw Ray's smile, my old passion was rekindled. I wanted to make my own sweets again. To see the smiles of people eating them. That was my original starting point. I remembered that. Imagining the smiles of those who eat my creations. That gives me more strength than anything. I may not become as famous as the Kings, but that's okay. If I put my heart and soul into it, those who eat it, and everyone around them, will surely smile. Ray and Marilyn enjoy the sweets I make with delight. Just that alone makes my heart feel fulfilled. Despite everything, I am very happy now. I can say that from the bottom of my heart, and I can't help but smile.